they have all these badass rescue vehicles with ropes and all the badass equipment, but they can't drive anywhere up I-70 in any sort of time manner to get to where. So a lot of it is done coincided with a helicopter unit, whether depending on the severity of it, sometimes it's the National Guard, sometimes it's Flight for Life. And I think they actually have some dedicated like rescue helicopters at a few hospitals as well. But anyways, you talked about how to pick out a landing zone for a helicopter and how to guide them in. I mean, where do you even start with that? I think that's a key element, right? Like if you can't get
in this part of the country, it's definitely a key thing, because here, I mean, it takes hour and 15 minutes roughly to drive from the Springs to Cripple Creek.
Oh, easily, yeah.
It takes a helicopter 12 minutes to make that flight. They will call me on the cell phone and say, hey, we're headed that way. 12 minutes later, I'm watching them come across the ridge, in this particular environment, they are an absolutely invaluable tool. Now, is it, do you always grab the same tool out of your toolbox every time that you have a job to do? Unless it's a hammer, you normally don't, right? But it's a tool to have in your toolbox, and it serves a very specific purpose. And whenever you need it, it's literally life-saving to have access to that. So knowing how to set up a landing zone, understanding the limitations on the aircraft, knowing the do's and the don'ts, knowing how to contact and actually give coordinates to the communications center so that they can get a bird headed your direction. I've actually guided them in here just by using the cell phone, by talking to the communications center here in Denver, who's then relaying my information to the pilot over the radio. And I can walk them into exactly where we are. But it's
if you had a ham radio and you could program that to talk to the pilots directly?
The pilots have got about 5, maybe 6 laminated pages of frequencies that they can use.
Okay.
Here locally, and I'm not going to put it.
And I think you have to be certified to actually use one of those radios, right?
I don't think anybody's really going to come and check your card, but from a legal standpoint, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you do. Let's face it, the common cell phone, it's the common smartphone, I should say. It's put information at our fingertips, but it's also kind of dumbed us down a little bit.
100%.
Now, I can use my cell phone and I can pick out grid coordinates. I can drop pins. I can do all these things. I can get nearest roads at intersections in the name of creeks and valleys and meadows and everything else. But I'm an old map guy myself,
I am too.
And it's
navigation is so key, man.
It is.
I think that
it is.
That's probably one of the sharpest tools you could take into the backcountry with you, because if you get lost, you're fucked, dude.
Well, look. Navigation, medical, and knots are the 3 most undervalued skills. And unfortunately, when you get overconfident in one of those 3 areas, bad things happen. Either you just dropped your buddy off the side of the cliff because you put the wrong knot in. You chose the wrong treatment protocol from a medical perspective, and you didn't fix the problem, or you just got aimlessly lost, But those 3 skills, while they aren't the most glamorous skills out there, are really the 3 that will prevent you from actually getting into a true survival situation. So as long as you know where
that should be the training number 1. Don't really put yourself in a bad situation, right?
Like, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Kind of like Jason says down at TSU, he says, the number 1 rule of survival is don't die. It's really simple. It really is,
Yeah, that's funny. I love
Yeah,
Jason,
but
man.
yeah,
Shout out to
there's
Jason, by the way. He was our very first episode here. I don't know. I think I mentioned that to you. He was episode 1. We started this like right at the height of the pandemic, and I had a totally different thing planned for the podcast than what it's actually turned into today. But Jason was the first guy to say yes and come down. I had some other people say yes, but because of the pandemic and their involvement with government and that sort of thing and their positions, they were put into basically a chokehold. They couldn't do anything, right? Nobody could do anything. I think we were in lockdown. Jason came up. So that was pretty awesome, man. That was cool of him. And we've come a long ways. I got to get him back in here. Now we can have you and him together or something would be super cool. You know what would be awesome? I want to go back to this helicopter thing too. Have a Flight for Life pilot and you sitting here for an episode would be badass. That'd be incredible.
Or one of the flight medics or one of the flight nurses or whatever,
Yeah.
One of the things that we always want our students to understand is the emergency shutdown procedures for the aircraft. Okay? Where's the lever that makes the spinny thing stop? Okay? How do I disconnect the battery? How do I kill the fuel supply? Then the second thing is, how do I gain access to the inside of the aircraft to be able to get the flight crew out? Because these things do crash. And it's probably going to be someone with our level of training that actually is the first one to get to that crash site. So it's funny because the pilot always says, okay, you always want to get the pilot out first because I'm the one that has to make the statement to the FAA, and this is how you pop off this panel right here, and then as soon as you get that popped off, you just pull me right out. Everything's good. Then the flight nurse will say, no, wait a minute. I'm the only one on the bird that can hang blood, and I promise you everybody's going to need blood. So this is how you take off this door, and this is how you get to me. And then the flight medic says, wait a minute, nothing happens without an airway, and that's my wheelhouse. So this is how you take off this door, and it's kind of funny,
right?
But you listen to the interaction between them, and they actually operate under what's called a 3 to go, 1 to say no policy. So all 3 crew members, so that's your pilot, your flight nurse, and your flight medic, have to be in 100% full agreement. This is where we're at. This is where we're going. This is our current weather. This is what our LZ is going to be like. This is our patient. If one of them just gets a weird feeling and says, I don't know, something's just not right, all it takes is one person to actually give them the right to deny that flight request. And it is a flight request. It's not a flight dispatch. It's a request for that tool.
Gotcha.
So
requesting it right off the bat properly is probably
that's
probably
there's
half the battle right there, right?
Yeah. So down in South Carolina, I worked in a pretty rural county. We had 3 trauma centers, but gosh, the closest one was over an hour drive away. So we actually used a lot of air assets there. So there's a thing called mechanism of injury. And so if your mechanism of injury is vehicle versus pedestrian, you can kind of predict what injuries you're going to have, right? You're going to have, if it's a child, they're probably going to be on the front. It's going to be head, chest, abdomen, then pelvis. If it's an adult, it's probably going to be pelvis and hips because that's where the vehicle's going to hit you, and it's going to slam your head into the hood from there. Mm-hmm. Over in that part of the country, we'll actually launch the helicopter based upon mechanism of injury before we even get to the scene. Mm-hmm. We can always get to the scene and go, okay, this isn't near as bad as what they said it was going to be. Go ahead and cancel the bird. They're like, okay. They'll turn around. They go back and sit at the station and play Xbox for another 12 hours.
Right.
But yeah, it's always good to have them headed that way.
Sure.
You can always turn them around, but you can't get them there any faster when you need them. And I'll tell you right now from firsthand experience, There is no more welcoming sound than hearing those rotor blades coming in when you're working on a really, really bad hurt patient, and you know that the one thing that this person needs is a trauma surgeon, and you don't have trauma surgeon after the letters in your name. You know, that's what they need. I literally can't get them there fast enough. The helicopter can.
Right. There
is no more comforting sound than knowing, hey, the cavalry's here.
Not to mention they have a lot more on those helicopters from a ICU standpoint than they do in like a normal ambulance, right? Like,
they have whole blood here. Other than that, there are certain drugs that the nurses can push that paramedics can't. There are certain procedures that paramedics can do that nurses can't. And that's why you've got that overlap in the scope of practice.
Yeah.
So that's why you have a flight medic, you have a flight
nurse.
Right.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, those things are badass. So it's crazy. And I mean, my hat goes off to all first responders, but especially anybody that's taking it or operating at that level. I mean, they're dealing with the worst of the worst. If a helicopter is being called, you're probably watching people die daily, I would imagine.
Yeah.
So yeah, my hat goes off to all those first responders. So I'm sorry, back to the question I asked a few minutes ago, and I know that there's a lot of variables, but if you're just the common person, and let's say that you have just your cell phone to communicate with, what's the best spot to pick out for a landing zone? Where's
something level without trees, power lines, anything like that?
Common sense, right?
Over the top of you. If it's daytime, you want at least 80 foot by 80 foot here in Colorado.
Okay.
If it's night, you want something at least 100 foot by 100 foot.
Yeah.
So it's when the helicopter comes in, they're going to do at least one safety pass. And that's when all three flight members are looking out the window going, okay, I see that tree. Does anybody see any power lines, cows, anything like that? Is this a good LZ? Or from up here, we see another one that's maybe 150 feet away that looks like it's actually better. We're going to go for that one instead. So they literally get the bird's eye view.
Gotcha.
And, they can get all the way to you and abort if they need to.
Yeah. How are you marking that at that point or communicating that?
So the first thing that I'll do is as soon as I get a visual on the aircraft, I let the pilot know, hey, I have a visual. I'm at your 2 o'clock. Okay. Your landing zone is going to be in a grassy field. No overhead obstructions. You're going to see a dirt road that's off to the north. You're going to see trees off to the south. Winds out of the west at 3, and that's
because the wind can be variable, especially in the mountains.
Yeah,
on the ground as opposed to
helicopters actually operate a lot like fixed wing aircraft in that they like to take off into the wind because it gives them more lift. And this is one of those. This is one of those situations where Hollywood and the movies has really done the whole thing a disservice because there's some ridiculous.
Oh yeah,
I mean, if you want to see how little room is actually available in a medical helicopter, it's crazy. The patient's feet are literally sitting right here on the pilot.
Yeah, I know. It's wild.
It's crammed in there.
Yeah. Go to Prep Medic on Instagram, Derek, and there's some great photos. He documents a lot of this. I don't think we can name who he actually works for, but he's on a helicopter unit here, and then he's also a SWAT medic. But if you scroll down his page and just look at some of he's got a ton of photos of his unit and how tight it is, and to the point where the pilots and the nurses have to be a certain size, and they can only carry certain things
and weight and everything else. But
and then patients.
So here's your patient here on the left, and your pilot sits on the right. So the patient's feet are literally right here, in the cockpit.
Not a ton of room, huh?
No. And this is not what is portrayed on your major network.
Oh, no.
Medical shows, and it's.
And different aircraft have different capabilities.
Sure,
so this helicopter might only be capable of one thing, is to where they've, like Sam brought up an instance where they had to do a Black Hawk rescue at some point and do it with a different, an actual military grade aircraft to make it happen.
So in this bottom right-hand photo here, you can see that they are wearing night vision.
Oh, yeah.
That's standard. I mean, it's power lines show up really, really good in night vision.
Really?
Yeah, they do. And it's just kind of one of those
Yeah, he's a great follow. I should have both of you guys on at the same time.
Yeah, shoot. I mean, I'll do this. Awesome. I'll do this with anybody. I really will.
All right. So I guess if you have a cell phone and you don't have service, how are you? Can you mark a landing zone somehow with some sort of flag or a T-shirt, or
they can pretty much triangulate on you pretty well. It's, but even just walking back and forth in a field, once the flight crew picks up on that movement, then all of a sudden they're like, all right, that's where we're supposed to be. Because if you're just standing there, from their altitude, you look like a fence post.
Yeah.
I mean, really, even if you're doing this, you can.
I've also seen you, anytime that you're doing it in some of like the videos and stuff online, you're wearing high vis, right? Or high visibility stuff.
That's for training, because you don't normally take high vis into the backcountry.
No.
With you. So,
but I mean, if you're a hunter and you're in, this is a great point too that I want to bring up. If you're a hunter, you're going to be in camouflage and stuff. Like, try to get that off. I mean, your skin color would be better if the elements are good enough.
Yeah.
But also, like, people taking their kids out. Like, kids are most likely to get lost. And this was a great point that Alpine Search and Rescue, when we had them in, brought up. Be conscious of what you're dressing your kids in and what instructions you're giving them if they do get lost. Like, yeah, that camouflage North Face rain jacket is super cool. Right. It looks badass, but like, that's making it that much harder to find them in a scenario where they're lost.
Have you ever had Wazoo survival gear on the show?
I haven't. Jason's talked about them, and I think we've gone back and forth in some text messages. They make some badass stuff.
They're actually based right here out of Longmont.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't realize that they were that close. Yeah, no, they have cool stuff.
So I'm gonna pull this off for just a second. So this is a product that they make. It's called a cash cap. All right. Just a, standard cool looking cap. All right. But you look at the backside.
It's got the reflective
high vis in the back.
That's so smart.
And then you've got 3 pockets in here where you can stash some things away. You've also got storage underneath the brim as well.
No shit.
And it's wearable survival gear is what they.
That's genius. God, I got to have those guys in, man.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
Yeah, and they're local, fantastic company, very, very grounded in conservation. Conservation, preservation. Yeah. But I'm just a really, really.
That's awesome. So for the listeners that couldn't see, go watch the YouTube first of all. Definitely check us out on YouTube. The podcast is growing so much; it's a great spot to watch everything. But Mark just took off his hat here that's made by Wazoo. It looks like a standard military hat, but on the inside of it, there's a high-vis lining. There's also pockets in there, pockets in the bill. That's badass.
It is.
My hat ain't got shit on that. I don't even know what I'm wearing today now.